David Beckham landed in Madrid, signed a football contract, and accidentally became the face of one of the most misunderstood tax regimes in Europe, while years later Shakira became the warning label for what happens when you assume Spain will not look too closely at where you live, earn, and manage your life. Somewhere between those two stories sits you, not a celebrity, not a pop icon, but someone considering Spain and quietly wondering whether the famous Beckham Law still works in 2025 or whether it is already a trap dressed up as a benefit. My name is Hector, and I work with expats and internationally mobile professionals who need to understand Spain's tax rules before Spain understands them first. The problem with the so-called Beckham Law, officially known as the special tax regime for expatriates, is not that it is bad, but that most people think it is something it no longer is. People hear flat tax, no wealth tax, no worldwide taxation, and assume it is a magic shield, when in reality the rules have changed, the scope has narrowed, and the mistakes have become more expensive since the 2023 and 2024 updates. Stay until the end, because the most important part is not who can enter the regime, but what the regime no longer protects you from, and that is where most people get burned. At its core, the Beckham Law is a special tax regime that allows certain newcomers to Spain to be taxed as non-residents for income tax purposes, even though they live and work in Spain. Instead of being subject to progressive income tax rates that climb toward the mid-40s, qualifying individuals pay a flat rate on Spanish source employment income, which is one of the main attractions. To qualify in 2025, you must move to Spain for work reasons, meaning you are employed by a Spanish company, assigned to Spain by a foreign employer, or appointed as a director under specific conditions. Self-employed freelancers generally do not qualify, although the post-2023 rules opened a narrow door for certain entrepreneurs and highly qualified professionals, which is far more limited than most social media posts suggest. You also must not have been a Spanish tax resident in the previous 5 years, and your move must be genuine, documented, and tied to a work contract or appointment. Simply moving to Spain and then finding work later does not qualify, which is one of the most common misconceptions. If you qualify and apply correctly, the regime allows you to be taxed at a flat 24% on Spanish employment income up to a high threshold, with income above that taxed at a higher flat rate. This replaces the standard IRPF progressive system for that income, which is why high earners often see significant savings compared to ordinary residents. Another major benefit is that under this regime, you are generally taxed only on Spanish source income, not on worldwide income, which means foreign dividends, interest, and certain other income streams may fall outside Spanish taxation during the regime period. This is the feature that attracts executives, athletes, and internationally paid professionals. The regime applies for the year you move to Spain and the following 5 tax years, which gives you up to 6 years of special treatment if everything is done correctly from the start. Miss the application deadline, however, and the regime is gone permanently, which happens more often than people expect. Now here is where 2025 reality hits, because the Beckham Law no longer does what many people still think it does. The biggest myth is that it automatically shields you from wealth tax, because while non-resident taxation often reduced exposure in the past, regional rules and the introduction of new solidarity taxes have changed the landscape. Depending on your assets and where they are located, you may still face asset-based taxation that people incorrectly assume is excluded. Another major change is that the regime does not magically cover all types of income. Employment income is the centerpiece, but freelance income, consulting fees outside the employment contract, and certain investment income can fall outside the protected scope. This means side income can quietly drag part of your finances back into standard taxation if not structured carefully. The regime also does not protect you from scrutiny over where your economic life actually happens. If your activities start to look inconsistent with the conditions under which you entered the regime, the tax authorities can challenge your status, retroactively in some cases, which turns a benefit into a liability very quickly. This is where the Shakira lesson matters, because Spain has become far more aggressive about examining residency, economic substance, and the reality behind formal structures. The Beckham Law is not invisibility. It is a contract with conditions, and Spain enforces those conditions much more actively than it did a decade ago. Another overlooked limitation is family income. Your spouse and children do not automatically fall under the same regime, which means your household can end up split between 2 completely different tax systems. one flat and one progressive, creating planning issues that people only discover after the first joint year in Spain. So who does the Beckham Law still work for in 2025? It works best for high-earning employees with clean employment contracts, limited side income, and significant foreign income or assets they want to keep outside the Spanish tax net for a defined period. It works less well for freelancers, hybrid earners, and people whose income structure evolves after arrival. The most expensive mistake is assuming eligibility without confirmation, or assuming coverage without understanding exclusions. The second most expensive mistake is failing to apply within the strict deadline after registering with Spanish Social Security, which permanently closes the door no matter how qualified you are. If you are considering Spain, the real question is not whether the Beckham Law exists, but whether it matches your actual income, assets, and plans for the next 6 years. When it fits, it can save you tens of thousands per year. When it does not, it creates a false sense of security that collapses under audit. Understanding how the regime works today, not how it worked when Beckham signed his contract, is the difference between using Spain's tax system intelligently and becoming the next cautionary headline, because Spain is no longer impressed by fame, assumptions, or good intentions, only by paperwork, timing, and whether your situation matches the rules on the page.